Hi, I'm Brad DeRoche, and I am going to give a lecture today on music, of course. The topic here today, what we decided upon for this series, was on popular music. Does it have a place in our repertoire? And I put in a subtitle of a classical musician's musings on including popular music into the classical guitar repertoire. So this lecture is going to be broken up into a few different parts. So I made it shorter in each part so that it's easier to upload. So I'm hoping that you'll follow through and watch all the different parts. All right. There's 10 main bullet points that I have in this lecture, and there should be an accompanying PDF for you to follow along if you'd like. I should start by saying that this lecture is the result of many years of thinking about music from a performer's perspective, from a teacher's perspective, and from a listener's perspective. And I've had many discussions with students and colleagues over the years about what classical music is, what art music is, and is it any different than popular music, and so on. I've also read a great deal of philosophical works on aesthetics and beauty and so forth. So all of those get mixed in, and I'm hoping to define what I believe music really is and how it should function in today's day and age for us classical guitarists. So let's dig right in. Here's first bullet point. Number 1, what is music? This is usually the first question I asked my students on day 1 in the music appreciation class. What is music? And you get all kinds of different answers. It's rhythm, it's beats, it's words, it's a number of different things. So what I felt like I needed to do is to really define what music is. And so here's the definition that I came up with. I think music is organized sound that occurs over time. It is created by humans to elicit an emotional, intellectual, or physical response. That's it. So I'll repeat it. Organized sound that occurs over time. It's created by humans to elicit or to bring out an emotional, intellectual, or physical response from the listener. And so if we accept that as a basic, very wide-ranging definition of music, a blanket that covers almost all music, I think it would work pretty well. It covers most of our bases. But then we need to add a little bit more to this. What is sound? And I won't go into the physical aspects of it so much, but a musical sound versus a noise sound. And they are different, actually. A musical sound is effectually simpler than a noise sound. Musical sound has fewer components to it. It's primarily made up of a fundamental tone, a single tone vibrating at a specific frequency. And I can give you a quick example here. This is an A 440 on, it's a sine wave generated by this metronome. Now that sound is a single frequency, 440 cycles per second. And it unfortunately doesn't have any overtones, which makes it even simpler than most of our musical instruments. Most of our musical instruments add overtones to this to make them more beautiful sounding, more harmonious. Contrast that with a noise sound, something like that, for instance. These noise sounds are more complex in that they have more fundamental pitches, and also the overtones don't line up with the fundamental nearly as well. They're more complex. Most of the time in music, we use musical sounds, but not always. Noises can be included also, but they have to be organized in such a way to help bring out some kind of response. So dogs barking, well, I don't normally include those as musical sounds, but they could be used in a musical composition. Who let the dogs out? All right, case in point, piece of music where you hear dogs barking in the background or people making dog barking sounds. All right, so point A, what is music? Organized sound that occurs over time to elicit a response from the listener, and it's primarily built up of musical sounds, which are more pure or fundamental than noise sounds. All right, that brings us to the next point. What is the purpose of music? Now, I have to say, this is kind of tricky for me to come up with these different definitions, but I feel we need them in order to really get to the heart of the matter here. I believe the purpose of music is threefold. It is, first, to produce pleasure in the listener, a pleasurable response. Second, to express and modulate our emotions, happy, sad, etc. And third, to realize our deepest thoughts and abilities, which also then takes in performers as well as listeners. So these three primary purposes of music, this is why we do this. We create music as performers to produce a pleasurable response in our listeners. We also want to move their emotions with our music, to express our own emotions through music, and to move those emotions in other people. And then lastly, I believe it helps us to realize our deepest thoughts and skills and abilities. So that's, for me, those three things are the primary purpose or purposes of music. Next, let's move on to bullet point number 3, the function of music. This is different than the purpose, I think. The function of music is, again, threefold. It's, in my opinion, it has three primary functions. One, ceremonial, music that accompanies some kind of a ritual. And these rituals can range from church services to, weddings, etc. So any kind of ritual that music accompanies is a ceremonial nature. That's one of the primary functions of music, is to enhance a ceremony. Second function of music is recreational. And the words here can be maybe altered. Recreational seems like a pretty good word to use, but it's basically music that is used to entertain us. It's a diversion. It accompanies a leisure activity of some kind, or perhaps storytelling. And so the important point here, though, is that music as a recreation or an entertainment isn't the primary focus, nor is it with ceremonial music. So it's an adornment or an accompaniment to some other activity. And so it puts music on a kind of lower status in that sense, in that it's not the primary focus of the event in most cases, if it's ceremonial or recreational. However, I believe there's a third function of music, and that is as art music. Now, I should say this right up front here. I prefer the term art music as opposed to classical music, because for me, classical music really locks us into more of a time period, because that same term is used for a specific era in music from, roughly 1750 to roughly 1825, give or take. So I prefer the word art music as opposed to classical music. Okay, anyway, our third function of music is as art or artistic, an artistic function. And in that sense, the primary focus of music is on the sound. It is on itself. We could say that the music is valued in and of itself. It stands alone. It doesn't need to be danced to. It doesn't need to have movies showing in the background. There's no ritual needed for it to have a purpose. So it functions as art. And I think this is an important category, and this is primarily what we're trying to do as classical guitarists, is to play art music. So if you think that is correct, I want you to think about this too, and we can have this discussion or argument later on about it. How does music function? I think those are the three primary ways. It's either part of a ceremony, some sort of recreation, or it is an art form. All right, so this is part 1. Why don't you hang on and tune into the next video. I'm going to keep each one of these short, roughly 10 minutes if I can, and I'll string a few of them together. So I'll come back for part 2.